Hi, I'm Suzanne. I am a videographer and photographer, and I am here because this month is International Women's Day on the 8th of March. In keeping with this year's theme of hashtag Choose to Challenge, I've been working with 9 brilliant women creating a photo series to represent different stereotypes that modern Australian women face. Alongside this photo series, we've recorded a conversation on each of these topics to help create a dialogue around them for International Women's Day. You're going to get one a day until the 9th of March, so stay tuned. Today's topic is hashtag Choose to Challenge leadership. We all know that there needs to be more female leadership, and I have this conversation with Jess. So please comment after you've watched or listened, and head over to my Instagram to see the photos of Jess in association with the topic of leadership at suzanne.was.here. Now, get into it. This episode, we're going to be talking about leadership, and I have the wonderful
Jessica Brady
here to talk with me today. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. So I have been in finance since 2006, and I've worked for some really big banks and insurance companies. And in 2017, I and an ex-colleague of Macquarie Bank decided to start our own financial advice business. So we run a financial advice business called Fox and Hare. With my co-founder, Glenn, we now lead a team that is 13.
Wow.
Yes.
It's not been that long. You guys have achieved so much in not that long a time. It's so impressive.
It has felt like an enormously fast growth trajectory, which is really exciting. And then last year, because I felt that I didn't have enough on my plate, we decided to launch Ladies Talk Money, yes, which is all about helping anyone who identifies as a woman understand all things money, which is really exciting.
Yeah, well, because there is a little bit off topic, but kind of on topic. There is a large gap in financial understanding for women, I think, coming from what it was only in the 80s that women were allowed to even have a credit card by themselves. So women have kind of been shut out of that conversation historically.
Yeah. And there's an enormous amount of work to do to help us gain financial equality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess where I'd like to start is maybe let's go back a bit. And when you first kind of were moving into a professional workplace, what was your experience as far as women in leadership?
I was extremely lucky in my first role at a bank to have a very, very good, kind, caring female boss. And she really wanted me to succeed, and she put me forward for a lot of roles that I didn't know that I was necessarily ready for. But, you know, in retrospect, I absolutely would have been ready for. And I was very lucky to have had that person guide me very early on in my career.
Yeah. Well, why do you think that you felt unready at the time? Because I know that this is another issue, right, that women tend to feel unprepared for roles that men who maybe aren't as prepared for feel very prepared for.
Totally. And you know what's funny, Suzanne? I have always been a very confident person, and even for me, I have absolutely had that. Absolutely, yeah. I have had that. I have had that classic imposter syndrome. You know, I got a job at Macquarie Bank when I was very young, and I genuinely was worried at night that they were going to find out that I had no idea what I was doing, and I was going to lose my job.
You're going to be caught out, yeah.
I would actually cry about it sometimes. I was so terrified that they had hired me under false pretenses, that I must have said something incorrect to have got the job, which of course was not the case.
Yeah.
And so I can't imagine what it must be like for people who don't necessarily have the confidence levels that I already innately had within me. I think that's a huge barrier. And I think everyone needs to know that that is so normal.
Yeah. Do you think, like, societally, that confidence versus lack of confidence comes from, I mean, in Australia, everybody kind of gets tall poppy syndrome. If you think you're too good, you get cut down. Yes. But I feel in general, women, it's, if you love yourself or if you feel confident, then you must be a stuck-up bitch.
Totally. Even in my family unit, I'm the eldest, and I am one of 3. I have 2 brothers. My father would always say that I was bossy.
Yes, you don't hear that to a boy.
You never hear that. Now, I have strong leadership qualities is how I would have presented it as a child. But it's true. Like we peg women as bossy and we peg men as leaders. Girls are not bossy. Little girls can be leaders just as much as little boys. And I absolutely think we've got a lot of work to do to change that language societally.
And interestingly, it's like women are expected to be the leaders of the house, even though, you know, there's this idea of the head of the family being the man.
Yeah.
But women are expected to be the leaders of the house and to keep things running there, but it doesn't apply for some reason to the workforce.
It's like we have, we've created these 4 walls of a home and said, right, here is okay. But if you take that outside, it's like, oh no, that's not what this was designed for. It's like, well, bullshit. Like absolutely it can be designed for that. And I think it's our job to really test those boundaries, and it will feel uncomfortable, but we've got to do it, and we've got to go outside of our comfort zone. And I don't think we teach people to be brave in those circumstances. And I think for women especially, we've got to get really comfortable with feeling uncomfortable in those situations.
Yes, yeah. And I think also something that we talked about earlier before you came today that I think is really relevant is that women's emotional maturity is often used against them, whereas it can be a real asset in leadership. I know that the best CEO that I have ever worked with is one of the most in tune people I've ever met with emotions, and the fact that she's able to see what's going on with the staff and the team she works with before they're even aware of it sometimes means that the team works so much more efficiently, and it's actually a superpower, really.
Yes, I agree. I think empathy and vulnerability are hugely, hugely underrated in leadership.
Yeah.
And I think they are natural qualities that women often have. Yeah. And I think we see them as more, feminine elements of leadership. And I don't think we give them the kudos that they deserve.
Yeah.
And as you rightly pointed out, I think that I innately am good at that. I can sense when something's not 100% right within someone in our team, and I'll grab them or pull them to the side and say, what's going on? Are you okay? And then lo and behold, they're realizing, oh my goodness, all this stuff is going on and it's having an impact on work. So I think it's silly for leaders to not think that this doesn't have an impact on productivity and profitability. It absolutely does. But I also think being vulnerable as a leader is so important. So important. And I am always sharing with my team how I'm feeling. I'm sharing with the team any challenges that I'm coming up against. I'm really, really open about what I'm good at and what I'm not good at.
Yeah.
And I really try to get the team to understand this is something that's a blind spot for me. This is a weak spot because we're all humans and we have them.
Yeah.
How do we best as a business work with this, and what's your strength and what's your weakness?
Yeah.
What are your blind spots, and what do we need to do to nurture you so that you can be the very best that you can be, acknowledging that you're not going to be perfect.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
Because I think also women are scared about not being perfect.
Yeah.
So we need to tell them it's okay. It's okay. No one's perfect here.
Yeah.
How do we find your superpower, as you call it? Because we've all got them.
Yeah.
And how do we help you run in your, your highway? And then whatever's your blind spot, we'll find someone where that's their superpower.
Yep.
And I think that's how we've really tried to build our team, so that whatever someone is, their weakness, we find someone where that's absolutely their natural strength. And I think without intuitively understanding that and having a culture where you can be honest and vulnerable about that, it's very hard then to build a team that's diverse enough to allow for those different elements.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also just do want to talk about, I think it's perfect timing in a post the existence of COVID world.
Yeah.
Women in leadership as far as government, I think we've been able to see so starkly the countries which are led by women have had much better results in the control of COVID, namely Jacinda Ardern, the superhero, the legend of the planet. And I think, we are still so underrepresented in government, women are, but obviously we're getting better. But do you have any thoughts around what you've seen?
Well, I think to your point, there is absolutely, a correlation between female leaders globally and, pandemic responses and the quality of the response, if you like, and what that's led to. And we've seen places like New Zealand take what could have been seen as a very harsh model up front, and it's worked out very well. So I think, we need to see more women in those roles, because as we've said, there's very much, if you can't see it, a lot of people believe you can't be it.
Yes.
And I think we also have to celebrate success. What really frustrates me is when there is a scandal, when there is an issue with a company, and we saw this in a board position role in finance a few years ago, the female board members, the female, chairs, it was scathing. It was so malicious, in terms of their the media coverage. And I think media's got a lot to do with how we're portraying women in leadership roles,
yes, yeah.
Both in corporate and in government. And I think we have to, really question the media around well, where is the celebration of the good stories?
Yes.
Because there's certainly a lot of media coverage with bad stories.
Yes, and it's a lot harder for women to recover from these bad stories than it is for men. They're still judged more harshly.
Totally. We've got people in government who are guys who have done things where I have no doubt if it was a female who did it, they
They'd be
possibly
done.
wouldn't be in their role anymore.
Yep.
And we have to be very across that, and we have to lift the mirror to ourselves and as a society and say, why are we okay with that?
Yeah, we simultaneously expect more from women, but also don't want to give women more.
We punish them
Yeah.
far more severely than we punish men for their misgivings.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and women do it too. It's not just men doing it. We beat each other down just as much.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think, sadly, I have seen that in my corporate career, and it's probably come from a scarcity sort of mindset where, there might not be that many roles for women, the classic sort of one girl per team, one leader per area. Women can be quite nasty to other women, and it's our job to call that out as well as other women if we see it happen. And I have had it happen to me in corporate a couple of times as well, and it's hard. It's really hard because you think, oh my God, the sisterhood and solidarity.
And you want it to be,
You want it to be.
Yeah.
But we need to know that that's not always the case. And if you see it happen to another person, but also woman, then I think it's really important that we call that out, because it shouldn't be a competition between us.
It doesn't take anything away from you to lift other women.
Totally. It only helps.
Yeah. So going back to, you touched on media. I think obviously what I do, I feel like media representation is really important, and not just in news, but also fictional works. And something that I was reminded of as you were speaking was there's a speech that Reese Witherspoon did several years ago now. And she's like, how often female characters, like the lead female character in a movie, will turn to the man and say, what are we going to do now? And then she made a joke about, have you ever heard a woman turn to a man in real life and say, what are we going to do now? But it's, it's this narrative that's painted in society that a woman can't make the big decisions.
Totally.
And I think we are improving with this. Since I have seen a decline in those kind of things happening in movies. I think it is a lot less common, and the fictional representation, particularly post Me Too, has been a lot better. But there's still a lean to this. Even in a client that I was working with was talking about a video that we were going to make featuring a fictional manager for this video that we were creating, and everybody kept talking about he. And, partway into the conversation when we were talking creatively, I was like, what if it was a she? Not wanting to be an issue, but it's like, what if it was a she? And in that space, everybody jumped on it being a woman, and that's great. But I think it's this default that we have that a person in leadership must be a man.
It's this unconscious bias, and the unconscious part is really important to acknowledge, that it does just sit beneath the conscious level. And you know what? I've made those mistakes.
Yeah.
I have made those mistakes, and I carry my soapbox invisibly around everywhere with me.
Yeah.
And yet I also have unconscious bias. And so it is really important to call that out and understand that we're all on a journey.
Yeah. Well, and it's largely because of representation, both in like fictional media and in, government and things. It's because, if you're not seeing it all the time, you do form, like you said, these unconscious biases.
Yeah.
And I don't think that anybody should be villainized for that, but it's like we need to choose to challenge. Oh, hashtag.
Yeah.
We need to choose to, I wasn't actually even trying to say it, but we need to choose to challenge the unconscious biases.
Yes. And not only for ourselves, but we need to bring awareness for people around us
Yes.
in a very polite and respectful way
100%.
when we notice that there's those unconscious biases there as well.
Yeah, 100%. I actually had a client call me a few months ago, and he's like, I just wanted to tell you about something that happened here. He's like, I was talking to some of our team, and they were like saying, oh, this videographer, he's great. He must be really good. Good job finding him. And he was just like, it's a woman. And like left.
Oh my
goodness.
A real life woman is a videographer? What is going
Wild.
on? Yeah. And that is what we need. And do you know what? That's leadership.
Yeah. Yes.
We need to redefine leadership. Leadership isn't about how many people report to you. It's not about how many billions of dollars of profit you are giving to shareholders. It's about none of that. It's about saying in those small moments, if that is a standard that you do not hold true and you know that that's not okay, you must call that out. And to me, that is the definition of leadership.
Yeah. 100%. And I think even in the leadership, as far as leading people, doesn't necessarily mean you have to have people reporting to you. Like
No.
often I am in the roles that I come into, I'm often one of the lowest ranking people there. But because I am directing the situation, I will be telling people who are in charge of me what to do.
Yeah.
And that is, that is a very obvious form of leadership, but it has nothing to do about how many people report to me.
Yes, I think that's something that corporates, I think, could really pivot on, because I found where I was, very hierarchical, and it was classically hierarchical, and it makes it very hard when you are young and you're motivated and you're driven and you've got a great idea.
Yes.
To feel confident enough to say to your boss, hey, like, I think there's a better way, or what about this? And companies benefit from that.
Yes.
Us as consumers benefit from that because we get a better product or we get a better service or whatever.
Yeah.
But if we're having a very traditional leadership model, I don't think we're getting the best from people. And so I try in our team to have a culture where if you've got, it's like best idea wins.
Yeah.
I don't care who it's from. It could literally, the person who walks in, they're like, I'm an intern. I have not got a clue of everyone's name yet, but I see this as a gap. I'm like, brilliant. Yeah. Let's go. Let's do this.
Come into my office.
Sit down and help me build this. And I think there is that classic ageism in leadership as well. Like, you've got to have grey hair. You've got to have wrinkles on your face and so much experience and war stories. Nah.
So then I guess we've talked about some of the brilliant things about women in leadership, which, I mean, duh. But also, but obviously there are a lot of prejudices against female leaders. Like, we assume that they're going to be bitches and bossy and these words that we've touched on. So what kind of prejudices have you seen or experienced as a female leader?
Have I
I don't think you would have
encountered, or what I have seen are probably quite different, because I wasn't in a senior executive role in corporate. I saw them and I had a lot of contact with them, but I think in bigger organizations, there's very much this perception that you're right, that women leaders are cold and, bitchy and angry is sort of a thing, and like childless.
Oh, yeah.
And
or the exact opposite. They must be too scattered and too emotional.
Totally.
There's no in between.
Yeah, it's so, we really sort of we have this bizarre stereotype that if you're a female, it's very much like in The Devil Wears Prada, the Miranda Priestley or whatever it is, like this cold, hard, callous lady. I find, in terms of prejudice that exists for me, it's actually more that I work in such a male-dominated industry that when I ring providers, this is like a small thing that I encounter regularly, people just want to know who owns the business. They don't want to speak to me. They want to know who's
in charge,
the person in charge, or they want to speak to the financial advisor. And I'm like,
because you couldn't possibly know about finances.
I'm both. And you can hear the shock. And so it's that. And again, it doesn't have to be these grand sweeping gestures. It can be small things like that where, they were like, oh, sorry, I'm actually looking to speak to the director or something like that. And you're like, yes. And that there is the moment where we are challenging, what it is to be a leader. And that frustrates me to no end. And the team know by my tone of voice
when you've got that comment.
And I'm like, because I always think there's space between something and my reaction. There's space. And it's not their fault, because again, this is what they're used to seeing, but it does actually affect me. And then I think, what the hell am I letting this affect me for?
Yeah.
And actually, I think one other thing that I'd like to call out is I have pushed someone in my team to expand her role and to, really make sure that she is, having appraisals with me where she's singing her own praise, and I make her do that. And we're very big on, I think what's great about our little story is because we've come from this big corporate world and we've built a small business from scratch. You can take the best bits from small business, from large corporate land, and put it into small business. So we're very big on performance plans, development plans, appraisals. And I am really tough on them if they don't sing their own praises and ask for extra, responsibilities, ask for their pay to be increased, do all those things.
Yeah.
Because we need to teach that.
Yeah.
Particularly to young women who sometimes don't want to have that conversation.
Yes. Yeah. And we won't even get into the pay gap.
I can talk all day about it if you want.
But I think also just even the fact that having someone like you in leadership means that we're looking at these issues, that there's people who aren't just accepting the history of what leadership has been.
Yes.
And therefore everything that comes with that, other than just being generally male, it's all these other things that are going to make the workplace a better place.
Yes.
For everyone, including women.
Yes. And even small things like, what's your parental leave policy? Do you give super contributions while someone's on unpaid parental leave? All these little micro things, they're almost like little microaggressions that companies are like, well, that's how it's always been. It's like, yeah, but if it's shit, change it. Like, we've got to have a new lens. We've got to have a new paradigm. We've got to think things through differently, because clearly what has gotten us here to date has not worked overly well, given the levels of women in leadership broadly in Australia, in government leadership roles, and the time it is expected to take to have us reach true parity is too long.
It's 100 years, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, I think it's more.
Oh gosh. What I'd kind of like to explicitly, let's get like real ideas out of what we can do better in society as individuals, whether we're in leadership or not, to make it easier for women in leadership or to get into leadership, but also change the perspective on what a woman in leadership is.
I think a word that you just said there that I think is important to call out is it is important to be authentic, and it is important to understand that you don't need to look and behave a certain way to get a certain role. And we have to challenge that concept that A plus B equals, C, or whatever it is.
Only this formula.
It must be this formula, because then we're teaching it is a very prescriptive lens, and that you must do it this way. And actually there's so much opportunity for diversity and authenticity to come through. And I think we need more authentic leaders being authentic, standing up, saying, what has worked for them and what hasn't worked for them. And it shouldn't just be women. It needs to be men as well, because we need to change the entire view. But I think it's around helping understand what you can do to support the women in your life. And it may not be, your partner, it might be your friend group, it might be your sister, it might be whoever it is. What is holding them back? And you'll probably find that it's a self-limiting belief. And how do we help them challenge that belief for themselves? And then how do we help teams, if we're managing teams, how do we create a space where people all feel like it's okay to show up and to be authentic and to throw their ideas into the ring and to put their hand up and know that as a leader, explicitly stating you don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to feel 100% competent to do this. You just got to be ready to get your, sleeves pulled up. You've got to be ready to work really hard. And I know you're going to learn this on the job, because I know that you're a very talented and capable person. People are opting out of those situations because we are so clear that you must have all of these capabilities. And so we have to challenge that and say, no, be explicit and say when there's new project opportunities, when there's new role opportunities, go for it. The more that we're going to see this leaning into opportunities. And then also, if I can just call out, you can't lean in if you're doing all the housework, all the school stuff, all the drop-offs. I will never forget this. I went to an event, a corporate breakfast, and the woman who runs it, who is fantastic, and I have a lot of respect for her, before the event kicked off, she wanted to openly start by acknowledging her husband, who wasn't in the room, for thanking him for taking their children to school that day.
Just that day.
Right. And so I sat there and thought, I've never heard I've been to plenty of corporate breakfasts in my time, lunches, dinners, evening events. I've never heard a man stand up and say, thank you to my wife or partner who took my children to school that day. And it was such a profound moment for me, because I was like, this has to change.
But I also do just want to very quickly touch on, it's also okay and it's not unfeminist if you don't want to be a leader, a traditional leader. And I think we're also, again, it's like you'll find a way to hit a woman with either end of the stick.
Yes.
It's like you're unfeminist if you don't want to be in charge. And I'm like,
Totally.
that's fine.
And you know, for me personally, this is something that I've been thinking about recently. It's around redefining what does success look like? Because I think in a lot of ways, success for me personally has always been benchmark around, you know, the professional success and
Climbing that ladder.
And career success. And we have to pare that back, and we have to stop telling women and people at large that your worth in society is based on how well you've done in that sense, or how much income you bring in, or what's your, you know, net wealth. That is so untrue, because what success looks like should be different and very bespoke based on what intrinsically drives you.
Yes.
And we need to challenge that as well.
Yeah.
I think maybe the only other thing that I want to add is like, leadership can be any person, any day of the week, any color, any race. It can be someone who is wearing Birkenstocks, who is dragging their dog around, who is frazzled and has things everywhere. Like, it doesn't have to be this super polished, perfect, always organized person.
Yes.
I think we have to remind ourselves of that, because there is this very archetype of what a leader is. And I think some of the best leaders I've ever worked with have never actually looked like what the traditional leader has been. If you feel like you don't fit that profile, don't let that hold you back from what I believe we all have within us, which is the capability to show leadership.
Just from you talking as well about anybody can be a leader, the incredible leadership that we've seen as people who both care a lot about the environmental issues at the moment in the next generation, particularly of women, of these young women, and the leadership that they are showing in this movement that we need to happen, which we won't go into. It's so impressive, and it's so uplifting to see this coming through. It's so exciting.
And it's led by empathy. It's led by care. It's led by this want and need to look after people who aren't even potentially born yet.
Yes.
And I think, you know, that potentially is a feminine style quality, and it's coming out in radical activism.
Yeah.
And it's about saying those two things can sit next to each other and be fab. They don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think we've got a long way to go, but I'm really excited about the direction that we are heading as far as female leadership.
I've seen a lot of change, and I'm excited by what I see for the next generation of women coming through. And what I hope is that, you know, when I started my career, I honestly didn't believe that there was a gap. And it wasn't until, because, you know, in school I was like, of course,
Same.
we're smart, duh. And it wasn't until I got into my career that I could then actually see it. And I really hope that all of this fantastic work that all of us need to contribute to means that, you know, the girls at school now, hopefully when they get there, they don't ever see it.
And I think it is important to note that it's not just going to be better for women. It's going to be better for men too. I think there are a lot of issues that women can just, nobody's going to be hurt by more diversity in leadership. It's always going to be better. Yeah. Not just women, but diversity in across the spectrum of humanity. It's only going to make it better.
Yes, definitely. And I think that we have to be very clear to men that we're not here to push you out. We're here to
not taking anything away.
We're not taking anything away. We're growing this. Yeah. And we know that, you know, organizations that have higher levels of diversity perform better. It's going to be amazing, and it's going to take a lot of hard work, but I think we can do it.
Yes, I hope so. I think so. Well, thank you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming and bringing your beautiful Olive, who you might have seen walking around or heard walking around.
Yes, who's stolen a varietal. I think she's had about 4 days worth of snacks. She's
a good girl. She deserves it.
Interview period. But thank you for the opportunity, because again, these conversations are really important.
Yeah, I hope a lot of people really hear what you've said here, because I think you have a lot of value to offer to anybody who's going to watch this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Suzanne.